Everything we've done during the last 100 days is focused on the belief that Madeleine was alive when she was abducted, and certainly we were encouraged in that respect, and everything we've done is to increase the chances of her being returned.
You know, Amanda, I mean, we've been through and are going through that much pain with not having Madeleine with us, that anything that's written or said really is just a minor hurdle in comparison.
Nearly 2 decades have passed, and yet the name Madeleine McCann still echoes with a haunting persistence. On that May evening in 2007, a 3-year-old girl vanished from a Portuguese holiday resort, and the world has never stopped asking what truly happened. In the years since, investigators have chased leads across borders, deploying the most advanced tools available, from AI facial recognition to cutting-edge DNA sequencing. Each breakthrough has carried with it the fragile hope of resolution, but more often than not, it has only deepened the mystery. This is no longer just the story of a missing child. It has grown into something larger, a mirror reflecting our deepest collective fears. How can a child disappear without a trace in a place meant for safety, laughter, and family memories? How do ordinary decisions, seemingly harmless at the time, become the fault lines of tragedy? As we retrace the steps of that day and examine the many theories, accusations, and emotional storms that have followed, we are forced to confront not only the gaps in evidence, but also the shadows in human nature. Because sometimes the most terrifying truth lies not in the crime itself, but in what it reveals about us. The afternoon sun glittered over Praia da Luz on May 3, 2007. To outsiders, it was an ordinary holiday scene. Families lounged by the pool, children splashed in the water, and parents enjoyed the illusion of carefree escape. But within this picture of leisure, the McCann family's routine unfolded with details that would later be dissected with surgical precision. That morning, Madeleine attended the Ocean Club's Kids Club, where she was seen playing among other children. Around midday, the family gathered for lunch, a snapshot that now carries the weight of history. The photograph, showing Madeleine in a pink sun hat by the pool, her smile frozen in innocence, was time-stamped 2:29 p.m. Later that afternoon, she returned to the kids' club until about 5:30 p.m. before being brought back to the apartment. At 6:30 p.m., family friend David Payne stopped by and later recalled seeing all 3 children. Kate McCann answered the door in a towel after a shower, an innocuous detail that, over time, would become a forensic footnote. By 7 p.m., Jerry returned from a tennis match, and the children were put to bed. By 8:30 p.m., the parents joined their friends at the nearby tapas bar, leaving behind what they believed was a safe, sleeping apartment. On paper, this timeline feels routine, almost mundane. Yet beneath its ordinary rhythm lies something darker, a psychological web of trust, risk, and misplaced certainty. The McCann's decision to leave their children unattended was not impulsive. It was a pattern repeated throughout their holiday, rooted in what psychologists call optimism bias, the belief that danger happens to others, not to us. Parents often convince themselves that a brief absence is harmless, that routine checks are enough, and that familiar environments form a protective bubble. But hindsight casts these moments in a chilling light. The photograph by the pool, once a symbol of joy, has become a possible last image of Madeleine alive. Each timestamp on a kids' club sheet now reads like a countdown to catastrophe. And the McCann's routine checks that evening, actions meant to provide reassurance, would instead become the focal points of endless doubt and suspicion. The tragedy of May 3rd is not just about what happened. It is about how ordinary choices, ones many parents have made, were transformed into irreversible fault lines. It forces us to ask, in their place, would we have done anything differently? Among the many theories surrounding Madeleine's disappearance, one of the most unsettling suggests that she may not have vanished on the night of May 3rd at all. Instead, whispers persist that her death could have occurred earlier, and that the timeline presented to the world was carefully constructed to protect her parents from suspicion. At the center of this speculation lies a single image, the now infamous poolside photograph. Captured according to its metadata at 2:29 p.m. on May 3rd, it shows Madeleine smiling beside her father and siblings. To most, it is a final cherished memory, but to skeptics, its details, the direction of the shadows, the clothing, even the expression on her face, do not sit comfortably with the official account. They argue that the photograph may not have been taken that day at all, but rather staged earlier to preserve a fragile narrative. This theory gains further weight when paired with one of the case's most controversial elements, the McCann's rental car. 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance, the family hired a Renault Scenic. Cadaver dogs would later alert to the scent of human decomposition in the trunk and even on the car's key fob. Forensic testing also revealed traces of bodily fluids, though DNA analysis was inconclusive. Critics ask the obvious question: why would any trace of Madeleine appear in a car rented weeks after she vanished? Supporters of the McCanns insist the explanation is far less sinister. The car was used for family belongings, clothes, toys, even cuddle blankets. Cross-contamination, they argue, could easily account for the cadaver dog alerts. The science of canine detection is powerful, but not infallible. Still, for those convinced of foul play, the coincidence is too glaring. They imagine a darker possibility, that Madeleine's body had been hidden temporarily and later moved in the rental car under the cover of chaos and media distraction. This narrative, however chilling, collides with harsh realities. Could two doctors, already under intense scrutiny, really conceal their daughter's death for weeks without being noticed? To many, it seems implausible. Yet to believers, desperation makes the impossible possible. They argue that grief, panic, and the primal instinct of self-preservation can drive people to decisions that defy reason. The early death theory, built on fragments of evidence and layers of suspicion, may never be proven or disproven, but its persistence reveals something deeper: our unease with uncertainty. The pool photo, the rental car, the cadaver dogs. Each becomes not only a clue to Madeleine's fate, but a mirror reflecting our own discomfort with ambiguity, and our instinct to fill silence with stories of concealment and deceit. Of all the theories in circulation, few have stirred as much fascination and controversy as the claim that Jerry McCann himself was responsible for Madeleine's death during his 9:05 p.m. check on the night she vanished. According to this idea, within a narrow window of minutes, Jerry either accidentally or deliberately caused her death, then orchestrated a cover-up that has held for nearly 2 decades. At first glance, the theory seems impossible to sustain. At approximately 9:05 p.m., Jerry left the tapas bar and walked to the family's apartment. His visit is corroborated by multiple witnesses. He confirmed seeing Madeleine asleep alongside her younger siblings. Shortly after, he encountered another vacationer, Jeremy Wilkins, and the two spoke briefly outside. Their conversation was observed by Jane Tanner, another member of the dining group, who walked past them at about 9:15 p.m., the same moment she claimed to see a man carrying a child near the apartment. This tight sequence of events leaves little room for the kind of dark act theorists suggest. The idea that Jerry could have harmed his daughter, hidden the evidence, and returned calmly to dinner strains credibility. The apartment was small, the risk of being overheard or seen was high, and Jerry was surrounded by friends who were monitoring each other's child checks that evening. And yet the theory persists. Why? Not because it withstands careful scrutiny, but because it simplifies the chaos. It reduces an unsolvable puzzle to a single act by a single person in a single moment. It offers a villain, a motive, and a timeline neatly packaged within minutes. Psychologists call this cognitive closure bias, the brain's craving for resolution in the face of ambiguity. When answers are absent, we invent them. The 9:05 theory is compelling, not because it is logical, but because it delivers the illusion of certainty. It spares us from the terrifying alternative, that a child can vanish without explanation, despite every precaution, leaving only a void. To accept the implausibility of the 9:05 theory is to confront a far more disturbing reality, that sometimes tragedies defy reason, that even in safe spaces, even under watchful eyes, the unthinkable can happen. And for many, that is the hardest truth of all. It is easier to believe in a flawed theory than to live with unbearable uncertainty. As the case unfolded, suspicion was not limited to theories of cover-ups or staged photographs. From the earliest days, public fury zeroed in on something far simpler, yet profoundly damning: the McCann's decision to leave their children unattended. Jerry was a cardiologist, Kate, a general practitioner. With financial means and access to a babysitting service provided by the resort, they still chose to dine with friends while their 3 young children slept alone in an unlocked apartment just 50 meters away. They insisted they checked on them at regular intervals. To many parents, however, no justification could soften the horror. No dinner, no holiday, no fleeting sense of freedom could outweigh the safety of a 3-year-old and 2 toddlers. The anger deepened when one detail emerged. During the trip, Madeleine had reportedly asked her mother, "Where were you last night when I cried out for you?" That question, so haunting in hindsight, became a symbol of neglect, a child's plea that went unanswered. To critics, this was not a story of a sudden abduction, but of sustained recklessness, and the outrage did not stop there. Observers noted how, in public appearances, the McCanns displayed a calmness that seemed almost rehearsed. Where many expected hysteria, sobbing, and visible despair, they saw controlled statements, measured words, and the image of composure. To some, this looked less like strength and more like cold detachment. Their decision to continue jogging, to face the cameras, to pursue lawsuits against tabloids, all while Madeleine remained missing, was interpreted by detractors as self-absorbed, even sociopathic. But beneath this tidal wave of judgment lies a darker psychological truth: projection. Psychologists describe projection as the tendency to displace our own fears, insecurities, and guilt onto others. The McCanns became a distorted mirror of parental fallibility. Who among us has not been distracted, complacent, or lulled by the illusion of safety? By condemning the McCanns, the public reassured itself. We are better parents. This would never happen to us. This moral distancing provided temporary comfort, but at a terrible cost. It transformed grief into spectacle. It demanded that Kate collapse publicly to prove she was a good mother, that Jerry abandoned composure to show he cared. When they did not, they were branded as monsters. The outrage said as much about us as it did about them. For, in our search for villains, we often project our own shadows onto those already suffering. Nearly 20 years after that night in Portugal, one fact remains striking. Madeleine McCann has never been legally declared dead. This is not a trivial detail, nor an oversight. In the United Kingdom, declaring someone dead requires a formal court process known as the presumption of death. Families must present evidence that the missing person has been gone for at least 7 years, or that the circumstances clearly suggest death. Even then, it is a decision weighed with immense caution. Despite the years of investigation, despite German prosecutors in 2020 announcing their belief that Madeleine was murdered, Jerry and Kate McCann have never initiated this process. In the eyes of British law, their daughter remains a missing person. To some observers, this refusal raises suspicion, as though the parents were clinging to denial. But to others, it reflects something profoundly human: the refusal to surrender hope without undeniable proof. Psychologists call this state ambiguous loss, grief without closure, where the absence of a body prevents families from moving forward. Unlike traditional mourning, ambiguous loss traps loved ones in a cycle of what-ifs. It is compounded by media attention and the occasional emergence of new tips or sightings, each one reigniting hope only to extinguish it again. This cycle gives rise to another phenomenon: frozen hope. It is not the healthy hope that coexists with acceptance, but a suspended state where grief cannot progress. For the McCanns, frozen hope has meant living as parents still searching, not as bereaved parents in mourning. For the public, it has meant keeping Madeleine in cultural memory, not as a tragedy concluded, but as a mystery still alive. Frozen hope provides comfort, but it also exacts a cost. Families caught in it often experience chronic anxiety, depression, and difficulty rebuilding their lives. Yet, letting go feels like betrayal. To declare Madeleine dead would be to close the door on even the faintest chance of her return. And so, 2 decades later, the case remains caught in limbo between law and love, between reason and hope, between closure and a silence that refuses to end. From the very beginning, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann was not just a police investigation. It was a media storm, an international spectacle that transformed private grief into public property. At first, the headlines painted Jerry and Kate as tragic figures, respectable doctors thrust into an unimaginable nightmare. Images of them clutching each other, praying, and appealing to the world cast them as symbols of parental devotion. But as days turned into weeks with no resolution, the tone shifted. Leaks from Portuguese investigators suggested inconsistencies in their statements. Rumors spread of cadaver dogs, blood traces, and hidden evidence. the same press that once embraced them as grieving parents began to cast doubt. Were they victims or villains? This binary framing became relentless. The McCanns were either saints or monsters, innocent sufferers or cunning deceivers. Ambiguity had no place in the news cycle. Certainty, no matter how speculative, sold better. One moment crystallized this shift: the release of certain photographs on the 3rd anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance. Among them was an image of the little girl wearing makeup, lipstick, and eyeshadow. Another showed her licking an ice lolly. To many families, such snapshots might be harmless relics of childhood play. But in the fevered environment of the McCann case, the reaction was explosive. Critics labeled the photos disturbing, even sexualized, and conspiracy theories ignited overnight. Why, people demanded, would parents who feared their daughter had been abducted by a predator release such images? In this moment, the line between reporting and judgment blurred completely. The public no longer consumed news of the case. They delivered verdicts. Online forums seethed with accusations. Tabloids fueled outrage with lurid headlines. The McCanns found themselves at the center of a cultural trial where evidence mattered less than perception. Psychologists describe this cycle as media-induced moral panic. A single event, especially one involving children, triggers exaggerated fears. The press amplifies those fears, and society responds by imposing harsher judgments and moral standards. In the McCann case, ordinary parental choices became unthinkable sins. Every photo was analyzed for hidden meanings. Every expression was proof of guilt. In the end, the media did more than document the story. It reshaped it. It turned the McCanns into symbols, either of resilience or of deception, depending on which headline you chose to believe. And through that lens, the tragedy of a missing child became secondary to the spectacle of public judgment. Amid the endless speculation about Madeleine's disappearance, 2 figures have remained largely overlooked. Her younger twin siblings, Sean and Amélie. Just 2 years old when their sister vanished, they were too young to understand the chaos that engulfed their family. Yet, from that moment on, their lives would be shaped not only by what was lost, but by the world's refusal to let that loss fade. For Sean and Amélie, childhood was never private. Every birthday, holiday, or milestone was shadowed by the sister they barely remembered. Family photographs became memorials. Every public statement by their parents circled back to Madeleine. The twins did not simply grow up as individuals, they grew up as the siblings of the missing girl. Their identities were bound to an absence. As they entered school, the public fascination followed them. News articles, social media posts, and online forums repeatedly invoked their names. Strangers speculated about their well-being. Some even questioned whether they should have remained in their parents' care, given the accusations of negligence. More cruelly, reports suggest they endured taunts and bullying, classmates weaponizing conspiracy theories, mocking them with references to Madeleine, turning grief into ammunition. Psychologists warn of a phenomenon called shadow sibling syndrome, when a child's identity is eclipsed by a lost or missing sibling. Such children often feel invisible, living in the shadow of a brother or sister who consumes all emotional space. They may experience survivors' guilt, resentment, or a crushing sense of inadequacy. For Sean and Amélie, these risks were amplified by the glare of global media. They became not just shadow siblings, but public symbols of resilience and tragedy. The long-term scars of such an upbringing can be profound. Adults who grow up in this environment often struggle with anxiety, depression, or fractured self-esteem. Some retreat into emotional numbness, others battle feelings of guilt they cannot name. For the McCann twins, every resurfaced headline, every anniversary, every whispered comment at school risked reopening wounds. In truth, they were the invisible casualties of the case. While the world debated theories and assigned blame, 2 children quietly bore the weight of a tragedy they did not choose. They are a stark reminder that the cost of Madeleine's disappearance extends far beyond the headlines, into the private lives of those who never had a chance to grow outside her shadow. As we reach the end of this long, tangled story, one truth becomes undeniable. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann has never been only about a missing child. It has become a mirror, forcing us to confront uncomfortable questions about safety, justice, and ourselves. We have examined timelines dissected minute by minute, photographs scrutinized for hidden meaning, and forensic tests argued over for years. We have seen theories rise and fall, each one attempting to impose order on the chaos, to replace uncertainty with a narrative we can endure. We have witnessed the fury directed at Jerry and Kate McCann, the moral judgments, the accusations of negligence, and the impossible standards of grief imposed upon them. We have also seen how two silent children, the twins, grew up burdened by shadows not of their making. Through it all, one theme remains constant: ambiguity. Madeleine has never been found, never been declared dead, never given the closure that stories demand. In that absence, hope freezes, suspicion festers, and the case refuses to rest. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this tragedy is not what happened in that apartment in Praia da Luz, but what it has revealed about us. Our craving for certainty, our tendency to judge, our need to create villains when fate offers none. Madeleine's disappearance has exposed the fragility of our sense of security, reminding us that even the most ordinary families can be thrust into extraordinary nightmares. And so, Madeleine McCann remains forever missing, not only in the eyes of the law, but in the hearts of all who cannot bear to let her go. The crime may never be solved, but its shadow will remain, asking us to look not only for answers, but into the darkness we cast when we try to explain the inexplicable.